So it's been a minute since I've done anything on the Daily Wire. Now, if you follow my channel, you'll know that I have this very back and forth relationship with the Daily Wire. They will have these what I see as really positive impacts on the culture, one of which I want to do a video about soon, which is their new Bent Key, the new Bent Key network, streaming network and everything. I think that's really incredible. And then they'll have these absolutely horrible things like the way Candace Owens talks about the mentally ill. The Candace Owens and Michael Knowles talk about the mentally ill, where they basically want them to be treated like animals and that kind of thing. So they have this wild range, this wide range of like things that are so wonderfully good and things that are so heinously awful and that kind of thing. So anyway, I happened upon this. Variety magazine has published an article about a study that was done where they interviewed participants aged 10 to 24 to find out a number of things about what they feelings about things they have in cinema, in film and cinema and arts in general, a number of perspectives that they have. But one of those was, how do they feel about sex and nudity in movies and television? And remarkably, the result was that 51.5% of adolescents would like to see more content depicting friendships and platonic relationships, and they feel that there's too much sex and nudity in movies and television. The tweet they posted reads, "Young people aged 10 to 24 are looking for less sex scenes in television and in movies, according to a new UCLA study. 51.5% of adolescents would like to see more content depicting friendships and platonic relationships." And it links off to the article. Now, Matt Walsh responded saying, "Gen Z gets this one right. Sex scenes in movies are awkward and always completely unnecessary. I suspect the vast majority of people find those scenes uncomfortable to sit through. Also, why are they surveying 10-year-olds for this?" Okay, actually, Matt, if you had read the article itself, you would have seen that they actually did not ask 10-year-olds anything about sex and nudity and romance and film and television. They didn't ask them anything about that. It was children aged 13 through or respondents aged 13 through 24 that they asked those questions. Now, granted, I would imagine Matt probably doesn't think that 13 is an appropriate age to ask about those things either, but realistically it makes sense if we're talking about movies with PG-13 ratings can have implicit sex and small amounts of nudity, so it's reasonable to get the opinions of people that are allowed to walk in and see or rent a PG-13, well, video stores don't exist anymore, but walk in and purchase a ticket to a PG-13 movie of their own volition. So anyway, he's wrong about that and clearly didn't read the actual article. However, there's a number of things about this I want to address, and what's interesting, what he's really overlooking is the wider implications of what's going on here, which is interesting considering how much of his focus is on getting young people to get married and have children and child rearing and all of that. So first and foremost, though, I wanted to address his claim that sex scenes in movies are always awkward and completely unnecessary. Now, if he says always, I only have to produce one example to prove him wrong. But I was able to think of quite a few movies just off the top of my head of examples of things where either on-camera sex or nudity is necessary to advance the plot, or it provides a critical insight into character development, or it is highly thematically relevant to the film itself, that we gain a wider understanding of the film itself, or a wider understanding of the intent of the film, the world of the film, that kind of thing, the world building, because of the sex and nudity. I deliberately left out I deliberately left out things like softcore erotica and things like that, things that have the structure of a standard movie but are intended purely to titillate. I wanted to focus on specifically on actual movies that, or I shouldn't say actual movies, but relatively, at least relatively mainstream movies, movies that would conceivably have a mainstream theatrical release and that sort of thing. Those kinds of movies. And so, off the top of my head, I was able to think of Red Sparrow, Sirens, Basic Instinct, Antichrist, Nymphomaniac, Eyes Wide Shut, Sliver, Boogie Nights, Zack and Miri Make a Porno, Showgirls, Blue Velvet, Mulholland Drive, Rocky Horror Picture Show, 9.5 Weeks, 40-Year-Old Virgin, Secretary, Black Swan, Deliverance, American Pie, In the Realm of the Senses, The Dreamers, American Beauty, Fatal Attraction, American Psycho, American Taboo, Kids, The Reader, X, Sallow, Room in Rome, Last Tango in Paris, 50 Shades of Grey, Requiem for a Dream. All of those movies fit within the criteria that I just provided, and and the thing is, granted, a lot of those movies, the sex is necessary to advance the story in some way because the movie itself is about sex. It's exploring concepts of human sexuality. And Matt Walsh is on the record saying that he thinks that sex is that any sex outside of sex between a husband and wife is inherently degrading and wrong and sinful, etc., etc. Now, by the way, I just wanted to say some of these movies have aged better than others, and if you watch American Taboo, it did win. It did win an Academy Award, or was it just, I can't, I think it won. I know it was nominated for Academy Award. I think it won. But anyway, just when you watch American Taboo and the female lead takes off her clothes, just be prepared for the fact that the only thing you'll be able to think of is Andrew Dice Clay's rendition of Mary Mary, quite contrary. Anyway, but to give you some examples of why, from this list of why I picked these movies, Red Sparrow, that was at the top because I actually just watched it for the first time. So it's a film about a character played by Jennifer Lawrence, who is a Russian woman that's recruited by the KGB to participate in a particular branch of their spy training program, and it's a real branch of the KGB, which is that they train some of their spies to be capable of extracting information and manipulating people using sex and sexual intercourse and all of that. So one of the themes that we see, one of the things that we see throughout the first third of this movie when she's actually at the school is that the students are, male and female, are required to strip naked and perform sex acts in front of the entire class. That's the first step into this. Now, you might think that that is being played purely for prurient interest and purely for purposes of visual gratification and all that, but far from it. It's not played up like a porno, for example, where that would be the setup for characters that are inevitably going to get naked and fuck. Instead, what we see is that the majority of students that are put up to the challenge of doing that actually can't bring themselves to do it, and that's how they start weeding out the undesirables in the class. Then we have, with the character of Jennifer Lawrence, there's this ongoing dramatic tension between her and this young man who's in the class. And at one point during their training, she is by herself showering and he attempts to rape her, and she's able to fight him off. And so then following that, they are assigned to have sex in front of the class, and she, who was not able to do it early on, she, with no reservation whatsoever, strips completely naked and presents herself in front of him for him to have sex with her in front of the whole class. He gets naked, attempts to get hard and can't do it, cannot achieve an erection, and is too intimidated and is embarrassed out of the room. And so that's actually a very necessary component to the plot, the actual plot of the film. It indicates that this character has, not only is her emotional strength great, her emotional strength more important and more resilient than the physical strength of this man that tried to physically overpower her. But it also indicates that she, unlike the others within the class, has actually achieved the inner level of personal resolve necessary to do this that the rest of them were lacking. So that's one example. Another example would be like in Lars von Trier's Antichrist, where the film opens. Now, there's sex for various reasons throughout the film, but the film opens with this man and woman having sex in the shower. That's the first thing we see, and they're having sex in the shower, and we are immediately captivated by it. And it's Willem Dafoe and Charlotte Gainsborough, but Lars von Trier also hired hardcore actors to do the actual penetrative visual shot of penetrative vaginal intercourse in the shower. So it's cut together to look like people are actually having sex in the shower. In this case, the lurid drawing us, we are drawn into this lurid and yes, borderline pornographic depiction of real, actual sexual intercourse in the shower, and we are supposed to be drawn into it. We are supposed to be captivated by it. We are supposed to say, all right, this is going to be sexy as hell, because once we are drawn into that feeling and that focus, the next thing we see is that the two main characters, they're nameless, by the way, but the two main characters, the man and the woman, are having sex in the shower and ignoring their baby, who is in its playroom down the hall, and who, in the course of playing, falls out of a window and falls to its death. And so this sets that, us getting lost in that feeling over there, the erotic fixation that we would have on what's going on over there, is actually a necessary component of dramatizing and setting up our experience of the guilt and the shame and the horror that these two people will feel, that their own hedonistic self-indulgence took their focus off of their child, who died as a result. And that is the core theme of the entire film going forward. Other examples. Now, some of these, granted, there are depictions of sex I mentioned that are not meant to be pleasant. Things like what's depicted in Blue Velvet, what's depicted in Deliverance, that kind of thing. But they are necessary sex scenes to establish things about the characters, to establish dynamics between the characters. Like in Blue Velvet, we have Isabella Rossellini forcing Kyle MacLachlan to strip naked at knife point, which reveals and her behavior and his reaction to it reveals certain things about their interactions. Then Dennis Hopper comes in and violently rapes Isabella Rossellini's character, and that reveals things about their character dynamic. We are at all times expanding upon our knowledge of the characters and expanding upon our knowledge of the nature of the interactions going on in this world by seeing sex depicted in a certain way and seeing it used as a format to not just titillate but to horrify us and that kind of thing. Now, that's, like I said, when he says always, I really only need to provide one example, but that's hopefully enough. And by the way, things like American Pie and 40-Year-Old Virgin, I included those because sexuality, these are sex comedies, and the sexuality, like the scene of Jason Biggs having sex with a pie in American Pie, that iconic scene, these are scenes where sexuality is used to convey humor, to make us laugh, which is the purpose of the film. So far from, and a movie like Sirens, the movie Sirens is about it's about an Anglican priest who goes to confront an Anglican priest played by Hugh Grant, that goes to confront a painter played by Sam Neill, who lives this wild bohemian lifestyle with him and his wife and the women that pose for his paintings. But he paints these lavish nudes, these beautiful art nudes and everything. And Hugh Grant's character is meant to go to try to talk some degree of shame and humility and piety into the painter of these paintings. And the theme, the expression, the message of the film is that this relaxed, beautiful, bohemian attitude about sex and sexuality is actually a beautiful and life-affirming thing. It's not some vile, gross, dirty thing to be ground under with one's heel, to quote G.K. Chesterton. It's not that at all. It's actually this beautiful, life-affirming thing. Well, we can't make the argument that this open, free love, sex and nudity environment that these characters are in is a beautiful, good, and life-affirming thing if we're being modest about the very thing that we're trying to say is a good thing, and so on and so forth. The closest thing to including an actual softcore porn film in this, I think, is 9.5 Weeks. Zalman King was largely a softcore porn director, but 9.5 Weeks is a legitimate film. It's by far not my favorite film by him. Delta of Venus is my favorite film by him, but 9.5 Weeks is an actual plotted film that was released, had a mainstream release and that sort of thing. Anyway, so there's that. But then, more so, I wanted to talk about the real implications of this article that Matt Walsh seems to be ignoring. Now, Matt Walsh has pointed out a few, or has highlighted a few important things about Gen Z in different ways. In some ways, he agrees with this. For example, what we have here, deeper than all of the various social manifestations in which this is presenting itself, what we have here is a problem, a very bizarre problem that we seem to be confronting for the first time in humanity, and that is that the younger generation, the generation that we are relying upon to supply the subsequent generation, that we are expecting these people to be horny and fuck, so we have all of the people that we need to keep the human race going, or at least keep the country going, that kind of thing. All of the people that we're relying on to go do that, if this study is accurate, 51.5% of them, more than half of them, are dangerously losing interest in sex and sexuality. That's very disturbing. That is concurrent to other studies about Gen Z becoming apathetic about marriage, becoming apathetic about dating, becoming apathetic about relationships, that sort of thing. And then sadly, and I know I'm going to send a lot of people screaming and clawing at their eyes in rabid desperation when I say this, but this is also manifested in things like what's been pointed out by people like Abigail Schreier, with young women who are pursuing young women who seem to be pursuing alternate lifestyles, body modifications, and that sort of thing, as a way of opting out of female sexuality, as a way of opting out of beauty and being appealing to men. There's this weird, overwhelming thing where for the first time, Gen Z, the younger generation, is not just trying to rebel in its appearance, it's actively trying to make itself ugly, so ugly that it will be sexually unappealing. If you look at the way youth culture rebelled in previous generations, it was always with an eye towards being more sexually appealing. The parents were seen as the old fuddy-duddies, the old out-of-touch fuddy-duddies that they didn't want to grow up to be anything like. And so if you look at you look at hippie culture, you look at the leisure suit culture with the gold chains and the open collars and everything, all of this youth culture was always, in the past, always geared towards, and when I say youth culture, I should say like the critical 18 to 24-year-old demographic, the adult end of youth culture, the sexually viable reproducing end of youth culture. That was always geared towards sexuality and sexual availability and sexual conquest and sexual enjoyment and all of that. And it's very disturbing on a macro level that by every single metric, the current generation seems to be shutting down altogether, seems to be opting out of relationships and reproduction. I mean, yeah, I've talked about my own opting out of relationships, but I'm 40. I've been through the ringer with relationships. I've tried and pursued the stuff and found that I'm no damn good at it. That's very different from the kids who are making these decisions apropos of nothing. They are the same. Daily Variety article talked about how young people would like to see more asexual and aromantic people depicted in media. Again, this is not good. This is not a good sign that they need asexual, aromantic people to identify with in movies. Go look at the films that were made in, go look at the teen sex comedies, the movies targeted at young, the 18 to 24 demographic and that kind of thing back in the 1980s. It was all about how happy we are to be alive and how much we love fucking. And that was not contrary to what the uptight academics might want you to think. That was not the result of some evil capitalist empire that was trying to sell hypersexuality to the masses or something like that. No, contrary to what Andrea Dworkin and all of her McDworkinites might want you to think, most human beings actually do enjoy sex and actually want to pursue sex and relationships, and those depictions of sex and relationships that they see in cinema is not the control of the evil capitalist overlords. It's the capitalist overlords giving people exactly what they wanted to see because they were excited about being alive. They were excited about love. They were excited about relationships. They were excited about sex and all of that. And the fact that they're not is very concerning. It's very concerning that the human race is going in the direction of pandas. And here's the thing, Matt, to bring it back around to Matt, and why he should care about this. Certainly he cares about declining interest in heterosexuality and sexual reproduction and heterosexual relationships and all that sort of thing when it pertains directly to aspects of the culture that he wants to fight against and oppose. Things like the aforementioned outbreak of young girls actively trying to make themselves as ugly and unappealing as possible, that sort of thing. But here's the thing, and it's so funny because conservatives, the people that seem to want to preserve the values of America, seem to always be the people who never understand what those values are. So let me tell you a little something about the values of America. See, the reason you wouldn't have problems like a massive problem with a sudden lack of interest in sex or a sudden lack of interest in relationships and that sort of thing in a country like, say, North Korea or the old Soviet Union or any other repressive dictatorship throughout history is because rather than sitting around wondering why the young people that they need to fuck they need to be fucking so they can repopulate their countries and their civilizations, that sort of thing, rather than sitting around and wondering about that, the oppressive dictatorships would just go find the most sexually viable people, male and female, and force them to fuck, or at the very least extract their eggs and sperm and implant those eggs, forcibly implant those eggs in the women. They just make everybody do it by force. Now, here's the thing. Here's why the United States is different and better than those oppressive regimes throughout the world. The reason we're different and better is because we decided that we don't need that kind of force. We don't need forced breeding, things like forced breeding to keep the country moving forward, to keep getting the subsequent generation. We decided in this country, that individual autonomy, individual rights, and individual ambition and self-actualization were all that was necessary to keep society moving forward. We don't hear messages in this country about we hear them certainly from the Daily Wire and things like that, but in general, we don't hear messages in this country about how you have some kind of civic duty to get married. Even the Daily Wire doesn't say that. The Daily Wire's message is that if you get married and have children, you'll find self-actualization and joy in the adoption of responsibility and the responsibilities of parenting and taking all of that on. That's the way they try to make it appealing to you. But at the end of the day, that's how it's pitched to us in a free society. We're saying, hey, this is a really cool thing you should get involved in, and you'll really like it for your sake, for your own happiness, for your own fulfillment. That's the thing. That's what makes us different. We decided to try something totally new where we said, you know what? People pursuing their own desires and their own interests and their own self-actualization is better, and we can get everything we need out of those people if we allow them to do what if we allow them to pursue their own life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That's the idea of this country. So we are in a bit of a pickle, because if people are losing interest in the very thing that's going to keep this country going through the generations, if they're losing interest in that, we have a very real problem on our hands. We have a very real problem on our hands with keeping this country going. So, contrary to Matt Walsh saying, Matt Walsh wanting to be all prudish and standoffish about the implications of the study, far from that. No, Gen Z does not have it right on this one. There's all kinds of reasons. There's all kinds of reasons why Gen Z is opting out of it. And I know that people like Matt Walsh will say that the widespread ubiquity and availability of pornography and that sort of thing has rendered them uninterested and undesiring of it. And, granted, there may be examples where that's the case, but there's a lot more. There is a lot more to it than just that. You can instantly and totally savage somebody's reputation on social media, which makes people very, very reluctant to enter into intimate personal relationships where another person's intimate feelings are something that they have to manage and interact with and respect, and not just they should respect it anyway, but something that they have to maintain and be responsible for, and that sort of thing. Something where things where you can instantly be savaged online. That's a contributing factor to it. The and I could go on thinking of examples, but that's one that comes to my mind, and that sort of thing. There are so many reasons. Another major reason is that, and Matt Walsh, I'm sure, will agree with this, that the woke contingent, the woke influencers in our society, the academics, the apparatchiks on TikTok and Instagram, all of the woke people have taught Gen Z, they have taught the children of Gen Z to adopt the thought process and the worldview of depressed neurotics before they've ever even suffered the level of trauma and personal setback that would get them to that point in the first place. They've taught them to think like jaded, bitter, middle-aged people like me. They've taught them to think that way, as if that's some sort of course of enlightenment, that sort of thing. There are all of these negative things that are coming to a head, and that's why this is very concerning. But I wanted to close with one more thing that's so interesting to me, coming back to the thing about Matt Walsh saying that nude scenes in movies are always unnecessary. On the Twitter thread, there was some guy from PragerU that posted a video response, one of his own podcast videos, in response to Matt Walsh's thing, and Matt Walsh's comment. And this was a PragerU person I wasn't familiar with, but he was talking about how there's a sex scene in the movie Oppenheimer, and this is apparently very upsetting to conservative red state America. But it's so bizarre. His response is so bizarre to me. And this is, again, that this kind of influence. See, what I'm about to describe, we have to take this in as an influence on why young people are opting out of sex and romance and relationships and all of that as well. Because the thing is, what PragerU and the Daily Wire are doing extremely well is marketing themselves in a very authentic and organic way to young people. They're set up to connect with young people in a way that the stuffy Bill O'Reillys and Sean Hannitys of Fox News and that sort of thing really aren't set up to do. So that rebranding and repackaging of social conservatism as something that's cool and hip for the kids is something that also has to be factored into this. So, not just the woke, but the far, not far right, but the conservative GOP influence and everything has to be considered as well. And this is interesting. This guy, the Prager guy, was talking about the movie Oppenheimer and how there's a sex scene in the movie Oppenheimer. And there was he read this one comment from this woman who said that uh, her husband's some kind of porn addict or something like that. And so every time the sex scene came up, he would close his eyes and put his head on her shoulder. And which just blows my mind. But anyway, the Prager guy is talking about Oppenheimer, and he's saying, why do we need to watch this woman have sex in order to learn about the making of the atomic bomb? And he keeps saying, why do we need to see her having sex? And he says it in this tone where it's like, I mean, my God, man, she's having sex, not taking a dump. He sounds like she's doing something so repulsive, just unspeakably repulsive. And don't get me wrong. I understand people maybe not being attracted to the wider excesses of hardcore porn. I understand if you're not into like multi-partner sex or, whips and chains or whatever, you're not into all of that stuff. Those things are generally designed to cater to people with specific fetishes and that sort of thing. So I get that if that's not your taste. I understand that. But I cannot fathom being so deeply repressed that the thought of that just seeing a woman having sex, or in this case simulating having sex, seeing this occur is just so unbearably repulsive for you. I mean, it's bizarre to me because it's like, okay, this is the act that every heterosexual man is geared towards doing, biologically geared towards doing. Concurrently to that, comorbidly with that, every heterosexual man is geared towards wanting to do that with the most physically attractive partner possible. Fundamentally. Now, obviously, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but we have a drive towards reproducing with what we find to be the most physically attractive thing possible. This is what we're driven towards. It's what all of society is built around, is the natural desire of people to want to do this thing. Everything is geared towards that. And yet the thing itself you regard the thing itself as being so utterly repulsive that you want to pretend it never even occurs, that the sight of a beautiful woman, that's the thing, that the sight of a beautiful woman having sex is off-putting to you. But the creation of the atomic bomb is not. And that's so morbidly disturbing to me on the conservative right, the socially conservative right. You listen to people like Michael Knowles and Candace Owens. These people have a seething, raging bloodlust that is so morbidly expressed and morbidly toxic that it is genuinely horrifying to listen to them talk sometimes. But sex, they want to pretend it doesn't happen. They don't have a problem at all with their bloodlust being satiated with depictions of gut-splattering violence and mass destruction on a grand scale. Michael Knowles will even put on footage of Jordan Neely being strangled to death on the floor of a subway and smile and chuckle and speak lovingly of the person that's doing it. They have this insatiable bloodlust, but a depiction of a woman having sex is too much for them. And so I can't offer any grand encompassing solutions to all of these questions, but it is worth considering, and it's certainly worth considering when the Daily Wire and other conservative outlets raise valid concerns about Gen Z losing interest in sex and relationships. When they raise those valid concerns, it's certainly worth viewing information and studies like this within that context. Anyway, take care.